Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started on an ordinary evening, the kind of evening where the silence of the house felt both comforting and dangerous at the same time. The air outside was heavy, the sky painted with shades of orange fading into blue, and somewhere deep down, I knew this night would change everything. I wasn't prepared for it, and yet, maybe some part of me had been waiting for it all along. The line between right and wrong had always seemed so clear, but in that moment, it blurred in ways I never thought possible. I was 28, married for almost 5 years, and, from the outside, my life looked stable, happy even. But behind closed doors, the cracks had begun to show. My husband, a man I once adored endlessly, had grown distant. Work consumed him, responsibilities drained him, and the version of us I had once believed would last forever began to feel like a fading memory. I told myself it was just a phase, that every marriage had ups and downs, but loneliness has a strange way of whispering in your ear when you least expect it. That's when he came into the picture. He wasn't supposed to matter, just a friend, someone I trusted. He was 29, warm in a way my husband hadn't been in months, attentive in the smallest details, like remembering how I take my coffee or noticing the sadness in my eyes before I even spoke a word. He made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen again. What started as harmless conversations and casual visits slowly began to evolve into something more, something neither of us admitted, but both of us felt. It's hard to explain how quickly a moment can spiral into something you never thought you'd allow. A touch on the arm lasted too long, a look across the room carried more weight than words, and before I could stop myself, I was in too deep. The guilt was always there, lingering, but so was the desire, the pull toward something I had convinced myself I needed. And that night, when the world outside seemed quiet enough to hide our secret, everything crossed the line. But secrets have a way of breaking through walls, no matter how carefully you try to contain them. I remember the sound of the door, the jingle of keys, the unmistakable footsteps that sent a chill rushing through my body. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat, and in that single instant, everything I thought I had under control collapsed. He was still there, too close, too undeniable, and my husband had just returned home. The sound of the front door clicking shut echoed through the hallway like a warning I wasn't ready for. My chest tightened, and in that moment, I could feel the weight of every choice I had made pressing down on me. I froze, unable to think clearly, while he looked at me with wide eyes, just as startled as I was. Everything that had felt so safe, so hidden, suddenly became fragile. I knew my husband's habits, the rhythm of his return home, the way he placed his keys on the counter, the heavy sigh he always gave when he walked through the door after a long day. Each sound grew louder, closer, until it felt like the walls themselves were caving in on us. But before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand how we even got here. It didn't just happen overnight. It was months, maybe even years, of small fractures forming beneath the surface. My husband and I had once been inseparable, the kind of couple people envied. We would take late-night drives just to watch the city lights, talk until dawn about dreams we thought we'd chase together. But somewhere along the way, those conversations grew shorter. Our laughter became rare. He buried himself in work, and I buried myself in pretending it was enough. When I met him, the man who would change everything, it wasn't with the intention of falling into something dangerous. He was a friend of a friend, someone who just seemed to be around when I needed company most. At first, it was innocent, coffee breaks that stretched longer than planned, errands we'd run together just for the excuse to see each other. But slowly, without realizing it, I began to lean on him in ways I hadn't leaned on anyone in years. He filled the silence my marriage had left behind. He listened, really listened, and that kind of attention is intoxicating when you've been starving for it. I told myself it was just friendship, though deep down I knew better. The way my heart quickened when he called, the way I caught myself smiling at my phone late at night, or the way I'd replay small moments with him over and over in my head, it was already more than I wanted to admit. Still, I pushed away the guilt, convincing myself I was only human, that maybe I deserved to feel alive again. The truth is, romance doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures. Sometimes it sneaks in through the cracks, disguised as comfort, as laughter, as someone remembering the little things about you. That's what made it so dangerous. I wasn't chasing passion recklessly, I was drifting toward it quietly, until suddenly I was too close to step back. Now, standing there with my husband's presence filling the house, I felt the full weight of what I had risked. Every moment, every choice that led us here replayed in my head, and I couldn't help but wonder, was this the night everything came crashing down? Would my secret unravel right in front of the man I had promised forever to? The tension between what I wanted and what I feared grew heavier by the second. My husband's footsteps were drawing nearer, and I knew there was no turning back. Somewhere inside me, a question screamed louder than the rest. Had I crossed a line that could never be undone? My husband's voice carried through the hallway, calm and casual, as if nothing in the world was wrong. He was calling my name, asking if I had eaten, the same way he always did. That normality made my chest tighten even more, because everything else about this night was anything but normal. I glanced at him, the one who shouldn't have been there, with panic in my eyes. His face was pale, his jaw clenched, and in that silence between us, 1,000 unspoken fears filled the room. We didn't need words to know that if my husband walked in right now, the world we had both built separately would collide in the worst possible way. I motioned for him to stay still, to wait, but my heart was racing so hard I wondered if my husband could hear it from the other room. The sound of footsteps grew louder, then paused, and for a moment, I thought maybe he would head into the kitchen instead of toward us. My husband had no idea he was standing just a few feet away from a secret that could shatter everything we had built together. It's strange how time stretches in moments like this. Seconds feel like hours, and every little sound becomes unbearable. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, even the uneven rhythm of my own breath. In that stillness, I thought about how different things could have been if I had made other choices months ago. If I had spoken up about feeling lonely, if I had fought harder for my marriage, or if I had kept my distance from temptation the very first time I felt it. But instead, I had crossed into dangerous territory, and now I was trapped between two men who represented two very different parts of me. My husband eventually walked past the room, heading toward the kitchen, and relief washed over me, though it was short-lived. This wasn't a solution, just a delay. He was still inside the house, unaware of the storm brewing just behind the walls. The tension between me and the man I shouldn't have been with only grew heavier. His eyes asked me a question I didn't want to answer. What now? There's another part of this story that I haven't told yet. Before things reached this point, before lines were crossed, there were so many moments where we stood on the edge and almost pulled away. Like the night he showed up at my door after an argument with his own girlfriend, how he sat on my couch and poured out his frustrations, and how I listened longer than I should have. Or the afternoon when he reached for my hand without thinking, then pulled back, both of us pretending nothing happened. Each of those moments built up a kind of quiet electricity, a pull we could no longer deny. And yet, despite how dangerous it was, I couldn't let go. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. My marriage had become routine, predictable, even cold at times, and in my weakness, I let that emptiness justify what I was doing. But was it truly love I had found in him, or just an escape from the parts of myself I didn't want to face? That's the heart of the conflict I was living with between loyalty and desire, between duty and passion. And the truth is, it wasn't just my life on the line. It was his too, and most of all, my husband's, who had no idea how close he was to a truth that could break him. The air inside the house felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if every corner of the room carried the weight of secrets I wasn't ready to face. My husband's voice drifted in from the kitchen, casual and unsuspecting, asking if I wanted tea. The kindness in his tone cut deeper than any sharp word could have, because it reminded me of the man I had once promised to love endlessly. And here I was, hiding a truth that could ruin him, ruin us, and ruin the version of myself I thought I knew. The man beside me, my secret, shifted uneasily. His eyes darted toward the door, every muscle in his body tense, as though he was preparing to run if things went wrong. I could feel his fear, but beneath it, there was something else too, something that mirrored my own, the unwillingness to let go. We had come too far to pretend that what we felt didn't exist. Yet every second that passed, every sound from the kitchen, was like the ticking of a clock counting down to the inevitable moment when everything would explode. My husband's footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate. He was heading back, closer to us. My pulse quickened, and my breath caught in my throat. I thought of every excuse I could give, every lie that might save me, but the truth is, I didn't know what I would say if he walked in right then. Would I crumble? Would I confess? Or would I hide, clinging to the fragile illusion that I still had control? It was in that moment that I realized something terrifying. The real danger wasn't just about being caught, it was about choosing. I was standing between two paths that could never meet. One led to safety, familiarity, and the life I had built for years. The other led to chaos, passion, and the possibility of something new, even if it came at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. The suspense in my own mind was unbearable. I watched the doorknob, waiting for it to turn, my entire world hanging on that small piece of metal. Every nerve in my body was on edge, torn between praying my husband wouldn't walk in and fearing what would happen if he did. And just as I thought I couldn't take the tension any longer, his shadow stretched across the floor, moving closer, step by step. My heart pounded so loud I was sure it could be heard. This was it, the moment where everything I had been hiding threatened to come crashing down. The shadow on the floor stretched longer, darker, until it felt like it was swallowing the room whole. My breath hitched, waiting for the doorknob to turn, waiting for my husband to step into the secret I could no longer control. But instead of opening the door, his footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was even worse than the sound. It was the kind of silence that left room for fear to grow wild. I glanced at him, my secret, and saw the same tension etched into his face. Neither of us dared to move. Then came the sound I wasn't expecting. My husband's phone rang. His voice dropped low as he answered, and though I couldn't hear every word, the tone told me everything. It was serious. His footsteps retreated, moving back down the hall, away from us. Relief flooded my chest, but it was laced with something sharper, dread. Because even though we had been spared for a moment, the truth hadn't disappeared. It was still lingering in the air, waiting for its chance to break free. When I thought it was safe enough, I turned to him, whispering fiercely that he needed to leave. But he didn't move. His eyes held mine, desperate, torn, as if he was silently begging me not to send him away. The room was filled with the kind of energy that makes your heart pound and your mind race. That was when he said the words I never expected to hear, "Maybe he needs to know." Those 4 words shook me more than my husband's footsteps ever could. For weeks, we had been hiding in the shadows, careful to guard what we shared, but now he was suggesting pulling it into the light. Was it courage speaking or desperation? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that if he meant it, the stakes had just changed. The danger wasn't only in being caught anymore, it was in what might happen if we decided not to hide. At that same moment, my husband's voice carried again from the other room. He sounded worried, tense, and I realized whoever was on the phone had delivered news that unsettled him. That unease seeped into me too, because it meant the night wasn't only about my secret anymore. Something else was going on, something bigger than I could see. And in a strange way, it made everything even more complicated. I found myself caught between 2 storms, one inside this house and another just beginning outside of it. The twist I hadn't seen coming was that my husband might already be distracted, vulnerable, dealing with something he hadn't shared with me yet. That gave me a terrifying thought. What if this secret came out right when he needed me the most? What if my betrayal cut him deeper because it arrived on the heels of his own struggle? The man beside me reached for my hand, his touch steady despite the chaos around us. His presence pulled me back to the dangerous truth of why we were here in the first place. I couldn't deny what I felt anymore, but I also couldn't ignore the man who had just walked back into this house, the man I had sworn to love. The stakes had never been higher. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I knew the choices I made next would change all of our lives. But the question remained. Was I willing to destroy one life to save another, or would everything unravel before I could even decide? The house seemed too quiet after the call ended. My husband's footsteps returned, heavier this time, carrying the weight of whatever news he had just received. I could feel the pressure building in my chest as the man beside me gripped my hand tighter, silently urging me to choose. My pulse was racing so hard it drowned out every other sound. There was no more running, no more hiding. The moment I had feared from the start was finally here. The door swung open, and my husband stepped into the room. His eyes immediately scanned the space, pausing on the figure that should never have been there. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The silence was thick, broken only by the shallow breaths between us. His gaze flicked from me to him, and in that instant, the truth I had worked so hard to bury came crashing to the surface without a single word being spoken. "Why?" That was all he said, his voice steady but filled with a hurt I had never heard before. It wasn't anger at first, it was disbelief, the kind that pierces deeper than shouting ever could. My throat closed, my words trapped between guilt and fear. The man beside me shifted, as though he might speak, but I knew this was mine to answer. I admitted what I had been too afraid to say out loud. I told him I felt invisible, that I had been lonely, that somewhere along the way I had stopped recognizing the two of us as the people we once were. Every word felt like a wound opening wider, but I forced them out because the silence had already done enough damage. For a long moment, my husband didn't move. Then his expression hardened, and I braced myself for the storm. But instead of shouting, he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think I haven't noticed? You think I didn't feel the distance too?" His words hit me like lightning. I realized then that my secret hadn't been as hidden as I believed. He had felt the shift, the coldness, the absence of what we once shared. And in his own way, he had been waiting for this confrontation as much as I had dreaded it. But before I could answer, the unexpected twist struck. He revealed that the phone call wasn't from work, it was from someone who had already seen us together weeks ago. A neighbor. My stomach dropped as I understood. This wasn't just our secret anymore. Someone else had known all along, and my husband hadn't come home to stumble on the truth tonight. He had come to confirm it. The climax was no longer about whether I would be caught. It was about what would happen now that everything was exposed. His eyes locked with mine, sharp and unyielding, and I knew nothing about our lives would ever be the same. The truth sat heavy in the room, impossible to ignore now that everything had been exposed. My husband didn't yell, and he didn't slam the door. He just stood there, staring at me like he was looking at a stranger. The weight of his silence was unbearable. The man who had once been my safe place now looked at me as if I had burned down everything we had built. My heart ached, torn between the life I had known and the mistake I couldn't take back. The man beside me shifted, his hand still near mine, but the connection that had felt intoxicating only moments ago now felt fragile, dangerous. He opened his mouth to say something, but my husband cut him off with a single look that said more than words ever could. This wasn't a fight he wanted to have with him. It was me he wanted answers from. I tried to explain, fumbling for words that might make sense of something senseless. I told him how lonely I had been, how I felt forgotten, how I had clung to something that made me feel alive again. But as the words left my lips, I realized they sounded hollow. Because no matter the reason, the betrayal was real. My husband listened, his expression unreadable, before finally speaking. "You could have told me," he said quietly. "We could have fought for us." That was the hardest part to hear. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Instead of facing our problems together, I had let silence and distance push me toward someone else. And now, there was no undoing what had been done. The man I had let into my life stood, his face pale, and said he would go. He didn't look at me, and he didn't look back. In that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. What we had shared was intense, but it was built on secrecy, on cracks, on the loneliness I had tried to escape. It couldn't survive the light of day. After he left, my husband and I sat in the silence of what remained. We didn't fix everything that night. Some wounds don't heal in hours or even days. But we talked, really talked, for the first time in months. About what we lost, about what we wanted, and about whether we still had enough to try again. The road ahead wasn't certain, and maybe it never would be. But what I knew was this: the choices we make in the quiet moments shape everything that comes after. Sometimes, love isn't about avoiding mistakes, but about facing what comes after them. And sometimes, the hardest lesson is realizing that love and betrayal can live side by side in the same story. So I want to know from you, do you think love can survive after betrayal, or is it the kind of break that can never be repaired? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know if you'd like me to continue this story with a sequel, because what happened after that night is something you might not expect. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you won't miss the next story. Summary. This is the story of a woman caught between the loneliness of her marriage and the dangerous comfort she found in another man. When her secret affair is uncovered by her husband, the night spirals into a painful confrontation that forces her to face the consequences of her choices. Filled with romance, suspense, and emotional conflict, it's a tale of betrayal, love, and the search for redemption. E10.